The wind howled across the frozen valley, carrying sharp crystals of ice that cut against the skin like knives. Snow fell heavy, covering the battlefield with silence, as if the world itself wanted to forget the screams of war. Between broken metal and shattered alien ships, a young alien girl lay trapped, her body weak and trembling. She pressed her back against a wall of rock, her silver skin glowing faintly under the pale light, her long hair tangled with frost, her lips trembling. Her people had fled, leaving her behind, and now she waited for the one thing she feared most. Humans. From childhood, she had been told one thing. Humans were predators, monsters, flesh-eaters who could never be trusted. They said humans devoured their enemies, drinking the blood of the weak, hunting across stars with endless hunger. The alien girl believed every word, so when she saw a tall human figure walking through the snow, her heart froze. He was covered in dark armor, black as the void, heavy boots crushing ice beneath him, his helmet reflecting the broken light of the frozen cliffs. To her, he was death given shape, and her body shook as a shadow fell upon her. The soldier stopped when he saw her, his breath fogging in the cold air, his eyes sharp but not cruel. He knelt down, resting one armored hand on the ground, and for a long moment he said nothing. The girl closed her eyes, certain this was the end. She whispered to herself in her own alien tongue, preparing for pain. But the pain never came. Instead, she felt something heavy and warm wrap around her shoulders. Opening her eyes, she saw the human had removed his cloak, thick and lined with warmth, placing it gently over her small frame. Her mind broke in confusion. Why would a predator offer warmth? Why would a monster show kindness? She stared at him with wide eyes, her voice trembling, though no words formed, only fear. The soldier spoke in a calm voice, words she barely understood. "Safe," he said, his voice steady, his eyes meeting hers. "Not enemy, safe." The words cut into her heart like fire. She wanted to laugh, to scream, to deny, but his tone was not the tone of a beast. It was the voice of someone who wanted her to live, not die. Still, her fear held her prisoner. She pulled the cloak tighter, but kept her eyes on him, ready to fight if he revealed his true nature. The human stood and offered his hand, his armored glove reaching toward her. The girl shook her head, pressing herself harder against the rock, whispering in fear. She imagined sharp teeth waiting behind his calm smile. Imagined the stories told by her elders. But the human did not force her, did not pull her. He only kept his hand there, waiting, patient. Snow continued to fall, and silence stretched between them. Her body was weak, her legs frozen from the cold. She could not rise. Finally, with trembling hands, she touched his glove, barely brushing against it. The human's grip closed, but not with violence. It was firm yet gentle, lifting her slowly to her feet. She stumbled forward, but his arm caught her, steadying her with strength that was terrifying and comforting at the same time. The girl looked up at him, searching his face for the monster she had been taught to see. Instead, she saw only tired eyes, eyes that carried battles, eyes that carried something she had never seen before. Compassion. He led her away from the battlefield, his cloak wrapped tightly around her, his steps careful in the snow. Behind them, broken machines burned faintly under the ice, smoke rising into the gray sky. She walked with him, her body shivering, her mind racing. Every step was a war inside her, a war between fear and the strange new feeling this human gave her. She had expected death, but what she found was a mystery she could not understand. As the icy wind blew against them, the girl whispered again, her voice small. "What?" The human turned his head slightly, his breath forming clouds in the cold air. He gave her the smallest smile, soft but certain. "Because it's right," he said. The words meant nothing to her, yet they echoed in her heart louder than any weapon. For the first time in her life, she wondered if everything she had been told about humans was a lie. And deep inside, a spark was born, fragile and small, but powerful enough to change the galaxy. The frozen valley stretched endlessly, a white ocean of silence broken only by the sound of the human's heavy boots pressing into the snow. Beside him, the alien girl walked slowly, her steps unsteady, her thin frame shivering beneath the cloak he had wrapped around her. Every time her eyes lifted to his armored figure, fear stabbed her heart, her mind whispering the same warning her people had always told her. Humans are predators. Humans devour. Humans destroy. Yet what she saw with her own eyes did not match the stories. The human did not drag her like prey. He did not chain her. He walked with patience, his pace slowing when she stumbled, his arms steadying her when she nearly fell. The contradiction tore at her thoughts, leaving her mind a battlefield more terrifying than the war she had escaped. When they stopped near the ruins of a shattered ship, the human set down his pack. The girl shrank back immediately, pressing herself against a jagged wall of ice, her eyes wide. He opened a small container, steam rising from within, the smell of cooked food drifting through the air. Her stomach twisted painfully, empty and weak, but fear was stronger. Her people said humans fed on poisoned meals, luring aliens with sweetness before turning on them. Her hands clutched the cloak tighter as he held out a metal bowl, warm in the cold air. "Eat," the human said softly, his voice calm but firm. The girl shook her head, her lips pressed tight, her body shaking. He did not force her. He placed the bowl beside her on the snow, turning away to eat from his own. This puzzled her more than anything. Predators never offered choice. Predators never shared. Her eyes moved from him to the food, back and forth, her mind screaming not to trust, but her body begging for relief. She waited until he was distracted, until he lowered his helmet slightly and took a bite of his own meal. Her hand crept forward, trembling, her fingers brushing against the warm bowl. She sniffed it carefully, expecting poison, expecting fire in her veins if she dared. But it was only warmth, only food, simple and strange. Still, she pushed it away, fear stronger than hunger. The human noticed, but said nothing, his eyes meeting hers for only a moment, a look not of anger, not of disappointment, but of patience. That silence weighed on her more than any threat. He could kill her easily, she knew. Yet he had done nothing but protect her, cover her, feed her, and still she could not trust. That night, they rested near the faint glow of fire, its light dancing on the frozen walls. The girl sat curled in the cloak, watching him with unblinking eyes. Every move he made was suspicious. Every shadow felt like danger. When he removed his armor piece by piece to tend his wounds, she froze, expecting him to reveal monstrous teeth or hidden claws. Instead, she saw scars, old and new, carve across human flesh, marks of survival, not of hunger. He cleaned his wounds in silence, wincing only slightly, then covered himself again. The sight unsettled her more than any weapon, for scars were not the marks of a predator. They were the marks of someone who had suffered. As the fire crackled, the human spoke again, slow and deliberate, his words simple. "Safe," he repeated, pointing at himself, then at her. "Safe." She turned her head away, but the word lodged inside her mind like an arrow. Her people never used such words. There was no safety among them, only survival, only war. The night stretched long, and though her body was exhausted, her mind kept her awake. Her eyes flicked again and again to the human who sat across from her, his gaze lost in the fire. Why had he spared her? Why had he covered her with his cloak? Why had he offered food instead of teeth? Her heart wrestled with every question, yet no answer came, only confusion. She pressed her face into the cloak, inhaling the faint scent of him, strange and foreign but not unpleasant. She hated herself for feeling warmth where there should only be fear. When dawn broke, painting the sky in cold blue light, the human rose and extended his hand once more. She hesitated, every muscle tight, but her legs were too weak to stand without help. Her hand touched his glove again, and he pulled her up gently. This time she did not pull away instantly. This time she let his strength guide her to her feet. For a fleeting moment, she felt something dangerous, something her people had never allowed. Hope. But with hope came guilt, and guilt was heavy. She told herself over and over, he is a predator, he is a liar, he is human. Yet her heart whispered a different truth. That maybe, just maybe, humans were not the monsters she had been told. And as they walked once more into the endless snow, she realized her fear was changing. It was no longer the fear of being eaten. It was the fear of discovering she had been wrong her entire life. The frozen land stretched wider with every step, endless fields of white broken only by jagged black rocks and shattered metal. The human soldier led the way, his heavy boots marking a path across the snow, the alien girl following behind, still wrapped in his cloak, her body shivering but alive. She kept her distance, yet every time she stumbled, his arm reached back to steady her. Every time the icy ground cracked under her small feet, his strength held her upright. It was a strange prison, she thought, a cage built not from chains but from kindness. Her mind repeated the lies of her people. Humans are predators, humans devour, but her eyes saw something different. He carried her when her legs gave out. He slowed his pace so she would not fall behind. He gave her water from his own flask, even when his lips were dry. No predator would do this. No monster would waste energy to protect what could be killed easily. And yet, here she was walking beside one. The world around them was not safe. Broken machines from the war jutted from the ice like bones of ancient beasts. Sometimes strange sounds echoed from the cliffs, metal groaning under the weight of snow, and sometimes shadows moved across the distance, drones left behind, hunting anything alive. When the first one appeared, buzzing low with red eyes glowing, the girl froze in terror, her instinct telling her to run. But the human raised his weapon, fire flashing from its barrel. The drone shattered and crashed into the snow, burning. She gasped, not at the violence, but the way he stood in front of her, his body shielding hers from harm. Later, when a storm rolled across the land, howling winds pushing snow so thick that sight was almost gone, the human built a small shelter of broken ship parts. Inside, she huddled close to the fire he made, her heart torn. Predators did not build fires for their prey. Predators did not protect. Yet he did, always, without hesitation. He sat near the entrance, his back against the wind, keeping her in the warmth while the storm raged against him. The girl stared at his silhouette through the glow of the fire, and for the first time, she wondered if perhaps humans were not the ones she should fear, but the stories themselves. At night, when the storm quieted, the human spoke again, his words simple, his voice steady. He pointed at the stars above, scattered like diamonds in the frozen sky. Earth, he said, lifting one finger toward a distant point, though she did not know which one he meant. Then he tapped his chest home. The girl tilted her head, her silver hair falling across her face. Her lips parted, but no words came. She had no word for home. Her people only had words for war, for hunger, for survival. The way he spoke the word carried weight, not of conquest, but of longing. She lay awake that night, the fire fading low, her body wrapped in his cloak, her eyes staring at the human who sat silent, his weapon across his knees. He should have been terrifying, a predator waiting for the right moment. Yet all she saw was someone carrying a burden she could not name. His scars, his silence, his patience. It was all so different from what she had known. For the first time, she found herself wishing to understand, not just survive. The journey continued, through icy caves where echoes whispered their steps back to them, across frozen rivers where the human carried her so she would not fall through thin ice. Every act of kindness pressed heavier on her chest, tearing at the lies that held her heart. She wanted to resist, wanted to keep hating him, for hate was safe, hate was easy, but hate grew weaker with each step, replaced by something more dangerous, something unfamiliar. Trust. When another drone attacked in the shadows of the caves, The human fought with brutal strength, his body taking hits meant for her, his blood staining the snow. The girl cried out without thinking, her voice breaking with fear, not for herself, but for him. She ran to his side as he struck down the last machine, her small hands reaching toward his wound. The human only smiled through pain, brushing her hand aside gently. "Safe," he whispered again, even as blood slid down his arm. Her breath caught, her heart pounding. Why would he protect her at the cost of his own life? Why would a predator bleed for prey? She could no longer answer with the lies she had been told. When they rested that night, she sat closer to him, her fears still there, but softened, her eyes searching his face for the truth hidden behind scars. He spoke softly, telling more words she could not fully understand. Names, memories, pieces of a world she had never seen. She found herself listening, not because she had to, but because she wanted to, and as the fire burned low, the alien girl whispered a single word, her voice trembling like the flame itself. "What?" The human turned his head, meeting her eyes, and gave her the same answer as before. "Because it's right." The words echoed again, louder than before, shaking her deeper than any weapon. The girl lay awake, her heart in turmoil, her mind questioning everything she had ever known. She had set out on this journey, believing she walked with a monster. But now, she wondered if she was walking with something far more dangerous. A protector who could change not only her fate, but the fate of galaxies. The nights grew colder as they moved deeper into the frozen lands. The alien girl wrapped herself in the human's cloak, yet it was not only the fire that kept her warm, it was the strange comfort of his presence. She hated the feeling, hated that her heart no longer raced with only fear, but with something else she could not name. Her people would call it weakness, but to her, it felt like strength. The human soldier never spoke much, yet every word he gave her carried weight. He pointed at stars, naming them with sounds she did not understand. He touched his chest, repeating Earth, as though that single word was worth more than all the weapons in the galaxy. Sometimes he told small stories in his slow voice, describing water that moved like endless silver snakes, forests so green they swallowed the horizon, and skies that rained life instead of ice. She listened, even when she pretended not to, each word painting images she had never seen, images her people never taught her to imagine. One night, the fire burned low, shadows flickering across the cave walls. The girl watched him remove a piece of his armor to clean a wound, the pale firelight revealing tired eyes and scars across his skin. Her breath caught in her throat. She had expected monstrous marks, the proof of a predator. But scars told different stories. They were not from hunting, but from surviving, from fighting not just for himself, but for others. Something inside her shifted. She realized predators do not carry such scars. Protectors do. She pulled the cloak tighter, staring at him as he worked in silence. Finally, her lips moved, whispering a word she had never dared to speak before. "What?" Her voice was soft, almost breaking, yet it carried across the fire. The human lifted his head, his tired eyes meeting hers, and with that small, familiar smile, he gave the same answer as before. "Because it's right." The words were simple, yet they sank into her heart like fire. No one in her world ever acted because it was right. Her people acted only for power, survival, and fear. The idea that someone could choose kindness without reason was terrifying, but it was also beautiful. The bond between them grew slowly, hidden in small moments. When she tripped on sharp ice, his hand always caught her. When the cold wind cut through her body, he would place his armored frame between her and the storm. When hunger gnawed at her, he always offered food before touching his own. And every time, she wanted to ask again why. At first, she told herself it was a trick, a slow trap to break her spirit. But no trap could last this long without revealing teeth. And the human's teeth were never bared, only his strength, only his patience. She began to notice the way he watched the horizon, always alert, as though protecting her was more important than resting. Predators do not watch the stars to keep prey safe, protectors do. The girl fought with her own heart. Her people would call her a fool for trusting him, a traitor for listening. But when she remembered how her kin abandoned her on the battlefield, and how this human lifted her from death with his own cloak, the truth became harder to deny. One evening, when the firelight danced across the ice, she dared to speak again. Why help me? She whispered in broken words, her tongue struggling with human sounds. The soldier blinked, surprised that she had spoken his language at all. He tilted his head, his lips curling into the smallest smile. Because you deserve more than fear, he said, slow and careful. The words struck her like a blade, sharp and warm at the same time. Her chest tightened, her breath quickened, for no one had ever told her she deserved anything but chains. That night, she could not sleep. She lay awake listening to his breathing, steady and calm, the rhythm of someone at peace, even in danger. Her heart whispered something dangerous, something her mind fought to crush, that perhaps she was not just his burden, but his reason. In the days that followed, she began to walk closer to him, no longer keeping as much distance. Her fears still lived in her bones, but it was no longer the only thing there. Curiosity had grown, and with it, trust. When he spoke, she tried to repeat his words, clumsy but eager. He laughed once, not with mockery, but with warmth, and the sound startled her so much that she froze. Yet in that laughter she felt something she had never known, lightness. The secret bond between them grew like fire in the dark, unseen by the galaxy, unspoken between them. But it was there, alive, undeniable. She was still afraid, but she was no longer afraid of him. She was afraid of herself, of the feelings rising inside her, of the way a single human had begun to rewrite everything she believed. And as they continued their long journey across the frozen wasteland, she carried a truth heavier than the cloak around her shoulders. That the human was no monster. He was something far more dangerous. A protector who could break chains not only from her body, but from her soul. The frozen days stretched into weeks, and the alien girl's steps grew stronger under the human's watch. Her fear had not vanished, but had changed, no longer sharp like a blade. It now rested in the shadows, replaced by a dangerous new feeling, trust. Yet trust is fragile, and the galaxy is cruel. They traveled across a valley filled with broken ships, rusted metal shining under the weak sun, smoke still rising from wreckage buried in snow. The human led her carefully through the ruins, his weapon always raised, his eyes sharp. But it was not machines that waited for them. It was her own people. The ambush came sudden, shadows stepping from the wreckage, alien soldiers with cruel eyes and sharp weapons, their armor glistening under the ice. The girl froze in shock, her heart leaping, her chest tight. These were her kin, her blood, the voices she had been taught to obey. They called out to her in their tongue, their voices filled with command and mockery. "Come to us, child. Leave the beast, leave the devourer," they hissed, pointing at the human. One soldier spat on the snow, his eyes burning with hate. "You walk with a monster. Do you not know he will eat you alive?" The girl's lips trembled, her eyes darting between the human and her kin. Part of her wanted to run into their arms, to feel safety among familiar faces. But something in their voices was wrong, harsh, cruel, sharp like blades. The human did not speak. He only stood in front of her, his body between her and them, his weapon steady. His silence spoke louder than their lies. Her kin tried again, their words dripping like poison. "They left you behind. Yes, but we return for you now. We will save you from him. Trust us." She remembered the battlefield, the moment of her capture, when they fled and left her broken in the snow. They had abandoned her, and yet now they came, not for her, but for revenge. One soldier raised his weapon, pointing it at the human. Her heart skipped, terror rushing through her. Without thinking, she moved, her body stepping in front of the human, her arms spread wide. The soldiers gasped, their eyes wide with shock. The girl who once trembled at the shadow of a human now defended one with her own body. "You cannot," she cried in her alien tongue, her voice breaking. "He saved me." Her kin sneered, their laughter cruel. "Saved you, foolish child. He is a predator. He only waits for the moment to strike." But the human remained still, his weapon lowered slightly, his eyes calm though danger surrounded him. If he had been a monster, he would have killed them already, she realized, but he had not. And in that moment, she knew the truth. The betrayal was not his, it was theirs. The betrayal was her own people abandoning her, filling her with lies, twisting her heart with fear. The betrayal was the life she had been forced to believe, and now the choice was hers. Her kin lunged forward, anger in their eyes, ready to tear the human apart. The soldier raised his weapon, fire flashing, snow exploding under the force. The clash was sudden, violent, deadly. The girl screamed, her voice echoing through the ruins. She grabbed a broken piece of metal, her hand shaking but her will strong. For the first time in her life, she chose not her people, not her fear, but him. Side by side they fought, the human's weapon tearing through enemies with precision, her small frame darting, striking, shielding him when one soldier aimed from behind. She did not think, she only acted, protecting the one who had protected her. When the last soldier fell into the snow, silence returned, heavy and cold. The girl collapsed to her knees, her chest heaving, her hands trembling from both fear and strength. The human stood over her, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder, steady, warm. She looked up at him, her eyes wide, her heart broken but alive. She had lost her people, her kin, her blood, but she had gained something far greater, something she never imagined. A protector who did not abandon, a human who did not betray. As the wind carried away the smoke and the snow buried the fallen, the girl realized her life had changed forever. For in standing beside the human, she had betrayed the lies of her past. But in truth, she had only betrayed chains. And in their place, she had chosen freedom. The ruins lay silent after the battle, the bodies of her kin half buried in the snow, their weapons cooling in the frozen air. The alien girl stood trembling, her breath sharp, her eyes burning with tears she did not understand. Her people had called her traitor. They had spit poison into her ears. Yet when death came close, it was the human who stood with her, not them. She clutched the cloak tighter around her thin frame, her heart breaking under the weight of truth. The human soldier looked at her, his eyes calm, though his body bled from fresh wounds. He said nothing, but his silence carried more power than the shouts of her kin. He reached out, placing a steady hand on her shoulder, his grip firm, not controlling, but grounding. In that touch, she felt something she had never known. Not ownership, not hunger, but trust. They walked away from the ruins, leaving the shadows of betrayal behind. The girl's steps were heavy, her mind swirling with questions, her throat tight with words she could not form. Finally, when the snow stretched endless before them, she spoke, her voice breaking. "Why, you stay? Why you fight for me?" The human turned his head slightly, his breath misting in the cold, and with the same calm voice he always used, he answered, "Because it's right." The words struck her again, like a blade carving into stone. She wanted to scream that it made no sense. She wanted to demand answers, but deep inside, she already knew. Her entire life had been built on lies, the idea that kindness was weakness, that humans were beasts. But here was proof carved in scars and blood, proof standing beside her in the snow. Humans did not fight because of hunger, they fought because of choice. They fought for reasons her people had forgotten, reasons that were more powerful than fear. At night, the fire burned low. The human sat sharpening his weapon, his face calm in the flickering light. The girl sat close, her knees pulled to her chest, her eyes fixed on him. Finally, she whispered again, "My people, they lie." Her voice cracked, the truth heavy on her tongue. They say humans devour. They say humans destroy, but you protect. The human looked at her, his tired eyes softening. He shook his head slowly. Not all humans protect, some destroy, some kill, but we can choose. He tapped his chest, the sound echoing faintly. Choice, that is what makes us human. The word burned in her mind, choice. Her people never spoke of choice. They spoke only of survival, of orders, of war. But choice meant freedom. Choice meant hope. Choice meant a future that was more than chains. She sat in silence, her heart twisting. For the first time, she saw herself not as prey, not as a prisoner, but as someone who could choose too. And she chose to stay by his side, not out of fear, not out of weakness, but because she wanted to. In the days that followed, she walked closer to him, no longer trailing behind in fear. Her steps grew steadier, her eyes clearer, her heart stronger. When danger came, she no longer cowered. She stood near him, ready to fight. When the wind howled across the cliffs, she leaned into his strength, not with shame, but with pride. One evening, as the firelight flickered across her face, she whispered a new word, her voice trembling. Friend. The human looked at her, surprise in his eyes, then warmth. He nodded once, firm and certain. Friend, he repeated, his voice carrying the weight of a promise. The revelation was complete. The girl who once believed humans were monsters now understood the truth. They were dangerous, yes, but not because of hunger. They were dangerous because of their power to choose compassion, to protect, to inspire. And that was a power greater than any weapon. As they continued their journey, the girl carried this truth in her heart. Her people had betrayed her with lies, but the human had revealed something far stronger than betrayal. He had revealed the secret that could shake the galaxy. That humanity was not a curse to fear. It was a force to believe in. The long journey finally carried them beyond the frozen valleys, where the land broke open into wide plains of steel and fire. The war still raged in distant skies, ships flashing like stars that bled, explosions echoing across the heavens. The alien girl stood beside the human soldier, no longer a trembling captive, no longer a shadow of fear. She was different now. Her heart changed, her eyes awakened, her soul carrying a truth greater than her chains. They moved through ruined cities, walls shattered by blasts, towers broken and burning. Other soldiers stared when they saw her walking with him. Whispers followed, some voices sharp with suspicion, some filled with awe. How could an alien girl, one of the enemy, walk beside a human warrior wrapped in his cloak, protected as though she was one of his own? But the girl did not bow her head. She did not shrink away. She lifted her chin high, her voice steady. She spoke the word she had learned, her first word in their language. Friend. The camp went silent. The humans exchanged looks, their suspicion heavy, but in the soldier's steady eyes they saw the truth. He nodded once, and that single nod carried weight more powerful than speeches. The girl was not prey, not prisoner. She was proof that even enemies could change. Word spread quickly, carried like fire through dry grass. An alien who once trembled at the thought of humans now chose to walk with them, not in fear, but in loyalty. Her story whispered across battle lines, reaching both sides. Some laughed, calling her broken, others raged, calling her traitor. But there were those who listened, those who wondered, those who questioned. And questions are seeds, small and quiet, yet strong enough to break stone. One night, under a sky burning with war, she sat beside the soldier near the fire. Her voice was soft, but steady. They will never forgive me, she whispered. My people will hunt me forever. The soldier looked at her, his eyes calm, his voice quiet but sure. Then let them hunt, he said. We will show them the truth. The girl closed her eyes, the weight of his words sinking deep. She was no longer running from fear. She was walking into destiny. The lies of her people had chained her heart, but the truth of one human had broken those chains. That truth could not be buried. no matter how many armies stood against it. The next battle came swiftly, a storm of fire and metal, alien soldiers charging with hate in their eyes, weapons raised high. The girl stood at the front beside the human, her body shaking not with fear but with courage. She cried out in her own tongue, her voice carrying across the field. Humans are not beasts, they're protectors. Her words cut through the noise, shocking both her kin and the humans who fought beside her. And when the human soldier lifted his weapon and roared, the army roared with him. Side by side they fought, protector and alien, their bond shining brighter than the flames around them. Every step, every strike, every cry carried a message louder than war. That humanity was not feared for its hunger, but for its heart, for its power to choose. When the battle ended, smoke rising into the sky, the survivors stood in silence. The alien girl, once abandoned, once filled with lies, now stood tall, her voice clear. She spoke again, not to one, not to a few, but to all. Humans are dangerous, yes, but not for the reason we were told. They are dangerous because they protect, because they forgive, because they inspire, and that is why the galaxy will never be the same. Her words carried far, reaching ears that had never listened, planting seeds that could not be burned away. The legend of the girl and the soldier spread like fire through every star. A story of fear turned into trust, of prey walking beside predator, of lies broken by truth. And though she had once believed the human would devour her, it was not her body he consumed. It was her fear, her chains, her despair. He replaced them with something stronger, something eternal. Hope. In the end, she understood. One human word, one human choice, one human act of compassion had shaken the galaxy. And the legacy of that bond would echo across stars forever.